Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. Pleased to be joined by the NCAA Senior Vice President of Basketball, Dan Gavitt. Dan, welcome. What does opening day mean for you?
Best day of the year, John. So good to be with you and so excited about the start of college basketball. Truly, except for maybe the Saturday semifinals and Final Four weekend, I think is one of the best days of the whole season.
I totally agree, Dan, and I'm curious, with your job, when you are literally documenting everything that there is that goes across the country, how do you make sure you're seeing as much as you can on a daily basis?
Well, it's not easy, but it's a labor of love, and it starts today. I mean, truly, you have to start the very first day, and even, of course, in the preseason, watching exhibition games, because there's so much ground to cover, so many teams to watch, and to be apprised of and how they're developing over the course of the season. It's a marathon, and it's a great journey, and I look forward to it every year. When I don't look forward to it anymore, maybe that's time to move on. But I'm so excited about this season. I can't tell you how happy I am.
No, me too. And I'm curious, as somebody who is obviously a self-admitted foodie, when Dan Gavitt is up late and the Mountain West and the WCC are on the TV, what is he noshing on at 11 o'clock at night or midnight?
I'm more of a salt snack guy than sweets, so usually pretzels, sometimes chips, leftovers. But yeah, pretzels is usually the go-to.
Fair enough. Always safe. Always, something that's reliable. But Dan, you have had such an incredible life in basketball. Obviously, your father, Dave Gavitt, was somebody who was really at the epicenter of the genesis of the original Big East. When you were growing up in the Northeast and you were seeing all those things come to fruition, what was it like?
Well, my dad was a coach before he was a commissioner, coached Providence College. A lot of success, took a team to the Final Four in 1973. So I was, in a gym from the time I was a young boy and ball boy and around his teams. And so I loved the game since I can remember. And but then to see him go on to do other things, start the Big East, then become president of the Boston Celtics. It's been lucky. I've been really lucky to be around great teams, great coaches, incredible players. And it's just been a passion my entire life. And certainly his, being his son and being exposed to so many people over the course of my young life helped me with my career, because I had some connections, I had some experiences that maybe others wouldn't have had an opportunity to. But then I like to think that I've also made my own way when I've had those opportunities and figured out how to do things and how to create relationships that have sustained me throughout my career as well.
What are the biggest things you think you took from your father that you still apply day to day in your work with the NCAA?
People. He loved the game, but he loved more than anything the people around the game. Players, coaches, referees, TV personalities, and executives, administrators, fans. It's a people game, right? And so I think and like to think and hope that I've had the same kind of passion for all the people that love our game and are such a big part of it, regardless of what level they may be at. And it's the thing that I enjoy the most. Our relationship, goes back a long way, years of mine. And we're all lucky to be part of this big, great game that we love so much and get to work in.
No question. And I'm curious because you had mentioned that, your father was a coach and obviously you grew up around college basketball. So you had all this access to all these great coachings, but at some point you had to decide that you wanted maybe a future in college basketball, but not in coaching. When was that moment?
Well, I started as a coach, actually, and probably that experience has helped me as much as anything, because Rick Barnes gave me this incredible opportunity right out of college to be a graduate assistant at Providence College when he was the head coach there. I worked for him for 6 years, learned so much about the game as an assistant coach, but also developed so many relationships and contacts that have helped me in my career experiences, not just in coaching, but also in administration, some of the off the court stuff that I was responsible for as a young assistant. And then the relationships, I got to know all the head coaches in the Big East and others around the country. But a lot of the assistant coaches, guys who are closer to my age, became head coaches. Jay Wright, Tom Crean, I could go down a lengthy list. Guys that I work with like Fran Frischella and Larry Shyatt. So, all those relationships to this day now, 30 plus years later, are still relationships that have mattered to me in my career and have helped advance me in what I've been able to do, I guess.
So you grew up in the Big East, but you were also the associate commissioner of the Big East, 20 years ago when we met. And that Big East conference at the time, I still will always say this, was the greatest conference ever assembled. 11 teams went to the NCAA tournament in 2011, and a team that was 9-9 in league play, UConn, won the national championship. What was it like to be associated with the Big East at that particular time?
It was the best, and until last year, the SEC eclipsing the 11 by 3 with 14 bids, it was maybe the most incredible season by one conference up until that time. As you mentioned, UConn, who was right in the middle of the pack, and Walker and a bunch of good freshmen won the national championship that year as well. It was incredible. The coaches were phenomenal, so good, so many in the Hall of Fame now, but also so supportive of the league. I remember distinctly putting together the schedule with Tom Jackson and others with CBS and ESPN, the rights holders at the time, and the embarrassment of riches of the games were just incredible. We would get down to picks number 40 and 45 and 50. Right. And it might be Georgetown, Louisville, or Villanova, against West Virginia. It was just a feast of incredible college basketball, and it was really special to be part of it. And I think to this day, people that were coaching or administrators at the time, we all see each other on the road, and we all kind of reminisce and talk about how special a time it was to be part of the old Big East Conference at the time.
And you were tailor-made, obviously, to work in the old Big East because of the roots that you have in the Northeast. We touched on that. But I'm curious, what was the genesis of leaving the Big East for the position you now hold with the NCAA in Indianapolis?
Well, it was not an easy move, nor was it an obvious move to me at the time. The Big East was starting to break up a little bit at that time. Syracuse and Pittsburgh had already left, and West Virginia was on the way out. And, it looked like there were going to be other moves as a result of conference realignment. It was also a year after my father passed away, and I really wasn't sure I wanted to move. I hadn't really dealt with losing him maybe at the time. But when the job opened up, there were a lot of people that contacted me and said, you really should look into this. You'd be good at it. And at first I said, I don't really think I want to move or take on a different responsibility right now. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like, it may be this incredible opportunity and moment in time that I should look into. And when I was lucky enough to get the job after the interview, it's been everything I hoped it might be and a lot more. To be part of March Madness and to work with the people that put on the tournament so effectively, it's been really fun, 12 plus years, and it's special to be part of for sure.
And you obviously have to deal with a lot of things off the court in this job, not just the games that are to be played. What has it been like in this ever-changing landscape, especially over the last 5 years or so, just overseeing everything?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the business now 35 years, John, and there's always been change, but never the amount of change and disruption like we've seen over the last few years, as you know. And so, change management is something that you have to work at. You have to be open-minded about, creative in dealing with things that are evolving in real time and some things that are out of your control. It's been interesting. It's been really challenging at times, but it's also been professionally and intellectually challenging and stimulating in many ways to be, responsible for something during such a dynamic time of change. I think we've done a relatively good job with the tournament overall. The committee, of course, is central to all of that and supporting them and helping to keep the tournament so successful and keeping it relevant and contemporary in today's environment, right? It is important too, because while we honor the past and the traditions that make it so incredibly special, you have to also keep it modern and keep it relevant and contemporary. And that, involves being open to change.
And obviously there's been a lot of changes over the last half decade. And, you have referenced a couple of times the working knowledge you have from being around coaches so much in your career. And I would say most coaches right now are concerned with two major variables, and that's the transfer portal combined with NIL. How does the NCAA moving forward, and I know this is obviously a very difficult thing to navigate, but how does the NCAA moving forward put some guardrails around these two main issues?
I'm not sure it's easily done, John, without some federal help, some help from Congress ultimately, because the guardrails that would be put in place are regularly challenged legally now, on a monthly, if not weekly basis. The NCAA as a national organization's ability to have rules and then enforce the rules has been challenged at every turn, and in any number of ways, not just NIL and transfer, but also eligibility more recently.
Yep.
So without having some protections from Congress, I think it's going to continue to be challenging. And I think we're all, coaches in particular, administrators too, are hoping for some more boundaries and some more manageability around what's a really hard to manage scenario right now.
We've had John Calipari on the show, we've had Tom Izzo on the show, and everybody right now is in the coaching profession seems to come to one conclusion when we talk about these issues, and it's that if the transfer portal allowed one free transfer, and then if you transferred 2 or 3 times, you had to do a year in residence, a large portion of this volatility would stable. I know that the NCAA, before there were these legal issues, put that in place and was enforcing that. How much, from your perspective, was that something that the NCAA wanted to align with?
Well, the NCAA did align with that and did defend that, and ultimately it was a court case by the state attorney general in West Virginia, which was then joined by Ohio and New York and other states' attorney general, that overturned that as a result of one student athlete who wanted to play and be eligible right away after a second or third transfer. And so that's the kind of legal environment we're in. It's just, it's not sustainable to have rules that they just get overturned because of legal challenges. And that's unfortunately the situation we're in. I agree with those guys. I think it's long-term in the best interest of student athletes to have that flexibility, but not to be a free agent every year. I don't think that serves their best long-term interests, personally or professionally. But without some help, that'll be hard to change.
Dan, what's ironic to me is, and I understand things are different when there's financial things at stake, but the programs that always redshirted kids were the programs who had the most success and the programs who had most players really being drafted at the highest level. I remember in 18 and 19, Villanova and Virginia were the 2 teams that won those 2 national titles. And each of those programs played a combined 16 players in those 2 national title games. Out of the 16 players, 9 redshirted, 4 of those players were first-round picks, and 2 were lottery picks. So I don't know where we got to this point where a year in residence is a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't either. We're seeing the same effect from a experience standpoint right now, right? We have players who are staying longer because of NIL opportunities, so they're in their 4th or 5th year, and experience matters in college basketball, especially when you get to the postseason, as you note. But the difference now is, rather than having the patience or to go through a redshirt year, sit, learn, maybe go through some hardship and develop as a young man because of all that, they're staying longer, but they're not sitting out, and they're not really being, having to deal with the challenges that developing as a player come with sometimes. And that, may or may not be to their long-term best interests. And I think whether we get back to that point or not at some point, I think it'd be good for them, good for the game overall, but time will tell.
Time will tell, but you noted obviously the importance of experience, and that brings me to my next topic, because over the last couple of months, there was a lot of discussion and chatter about maybe shifting to 5 years of eligibility for all players. And then obviously we saw a couple of weeks ago that that was not imminent. Do you think there is a possibility moving forward here that topic, 5 years of eligibility for all players, could come back to the table?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think the membership right now is just wrestling with all these open eligibility court cases there are, trying to get resolution around that before they can put their arms around what is the best model going forward. And right now that's still, 5 years to play for. But I do think there's an openness to, and I think it would be serious consideration given to longer eligibility. But again, having I think they've recognized that having a 5-for-5 model is good until someone challenges for a 6th year. Then you're going to look at a 6-for-6 or a 7-for-7. Or we've got college basketball players right now playing in their 6th, 7th, or 8th year. And, until there's some legal certainty around that, I don't think that there's an opportunity, an environment to be able to consider 5-for-5. But I do think that there are a lot of coaches and administrators that like that concept. Do away with the waivers. So there's no exceptions, right?
Yep.
5 years. Yeah, you can play 5 if you're fortunate not to be injured or have eligibility issues. If you do and you can only play 4, then it is what it is. But until there's some, legal kind of certainty around that, I think it's premature to really consider that. And that's what the membership has decided for the time being, at least.
As you just said, there's been a number of teams and programs that have been using players with 5 years of eligibility, most notably last season in the SEC, where we saw a record 14 teams reach the NCAA tournament. What was it like, considering all the principles there are in seeding the NCAA tournament, for the selection committee to have to seed 14 SEC teams on Selection Sunday?
It was a challenge, and what we actually anticipated that could be a new thing for the committee to deal with, whether it was the SEC or the Big 10 or the Big 12 or Big East, whomever.
Yeah.
So when we did the orientation and practice back in February, we went through the entire exercise of seeding the field and bracketing the field, which is unusual. We don't usually do the entire, field like that. But we just had the sense that last year could be the year where, all of the principles and procedures of seeding and bracketing could be challenged in a way. And so they were well prepared. And I think they did an exceptional job of balancing the bracket across 4 regions. And as it turned out, even with 14 schools, until we got to the national semifinals, I think there was only one other SEC versus SEC matchup. That was Tennessee versus Kentucky in the Sweet 16. So they really did a good job of bracketing and keeping, those teams kind of from seeing each other during the tournament. I think that'll be something going forward too. I don't think it's the last time that we'll see double-digit teams from one conference in the field. And they'll have to continue to kind of look at that and see how that goes back to what I said about evolving the tournament, right?
Yep. That's
a new thing. There's bit larger conferences with more depth. And so more teams from one or more conferences is going to be a more regular occurrence, I believe.
And Dan, I believe the principles, which you just laid out right there, where you don't want to have teams from the same conference playing each other. So if they play once, they can't meet until the second round. If they play twice, they can't meet until the Sweet 16, 3 times Elite 8, and so on and so forth.
That's correct, and that was changed, several years ago, and it's really been a good change, and certainly needed last year in particular. But I think because I think everybody, coaches, players, viewers, fans, they'd rather not see intra-conference matchups, especially early in the NCAA tournament. The thing that's made the NCAA tournament so special for 80 plus years is you play everybody. It's a national tournament, right? You get to see matchups that you don't see during the regular season. And at some point, if you're good enough, you're going to end up seeing somebody from the same league, like we saw last year with the SEC and 2 teams in the Final Four. But until then, it's better to see one team from one conference against another team from a different conference.
Well, one thing we know is that everybody is going to be into what happens in the NCAA tournament because it's the greatest event that we have in sports. And it feels like over the last couple of years that whenever the talk of NCAA tournament expansion came to the forefront, it never got to the red zone. I'm curious, what's changed over the last 6 to 12 months in that regard?
Well, it even goes back further than 12 months, really. The first change was this transformation committee that made a recommendation to expand NCAA championships beyond upwards of 25% of the schools that sponsor the sport. Was the first kind of recommendation that the committee took more seriously, like you said, than had been the case in my first decade on the job. And then, along with that came massive conference realignment over the last few years, right? Where you had the SEC and the Big 12 grow to 16 teams, the ACC and the Big 10 grow to 18 teams. The Pac-12 goes away effectively, although it's coming back in a different form. Mm-hmm. So, the makeup of the membership changed dramatically. We've had conference realignment before, but never so dramatically in terms of the large number of teams and the quality and depth of those teams, in fewer leagues. So I think it was all that. And then, there are other sports professionally, including as well as collegiately with the CFP, that have expanded their fields. And in some cases, it's been really positive for the sport. In others, you could argue it may or may not have been. But I think that environment encouraged more, a more diligent process to seriously consider whether or not to expand the basketball championships. That process is still ongoing. There's no decision that's been made, nor is there one that's imminent, except the committees have decided, as you know, to move on from 26. So it'll be a 68-team field this year for sure. But in 27 or beyond, it could still grow modestly. And time will tell if it indeed comes to that.
Dan, you brought up the word access, which is interesting because everybody, it feels like that's associated with a Power Four conference, uses the term access, and they want more access. But when you think about it, March Madness isn't just defined by the NCAA tournament. It's also defined by championship week, and every single power conference team is going to participate in their conference tournament, with obviously I know the exception of a handful that only have 15 teams in. The Big Ten just went to 18 teams, and the ACC is staying at 15. So what I'm saying is, if everybody has access for the right, except for the teams that finish at the bottom of one power conference, if everybody has access for the right to play for an automatic qualifier, why do we need to expand the NCAA tournament?
It's a very good question. I think it's been debated a lot over the course of last year. We do have a great setup in college basketball compared to other sports where you're right. Every conference, depending on how they set up their conference championship, gives their teams access by winning their conference championship to play in March Madness. Hypothetically, I think practically speaking, when you're talking about very, very very large and competitive and deep leagues, like some of the ones you're mentioning, you and I were at the Big 12 Media Day recently in Kansas City. And as I looked there, at the coaches, the quality of the programs, the quality of the players, and you think there's 16 teams you got to get through from the bottom of that league to earn that automatic qualifier, it's hard, if not impossible. And yet you might have a team that's, 8th or 9th in that league that's had a great non-conference season, a lot of quality wins, won some quality games in the Big 12, and may have, a reasonable case to make to be one of the 37 best at-large teams. So it's a great debate. There's not a right or wrong answer to any of it. The good news is that college basketball is so healthy and so deep, right? And there's so much parity that you can make a case that with the investment all these schools are making in college basketball, there's an awful lot of teams that deserve some opportunity to play in March Madness.
Has it been decided yet that if there is expansion, it will definitely go to 76 teams?
No, it has not. I can say with confidence it wouldn't be above 76, but 72 is still a possibility, or no expansion at all. And that consideration is ongoing and will continue to for the next several months, and just don't know where it's going to land ultimately.
Dan, we're both hoops junkies. You eat pretzels late at night. I'm trying, as I get post 40, to do more of berries and popcorn. It's a battle, but I got to stay up to watch St. Mary's if they keep winning 25 games a year. But everybody wants to talk about, and I'm sure you're dealing with it every day, this topic that's part of the vernacular of our sport right now about NCAA tournament expansion. But my concern isn't just really tinkering with the greatest event in sports. My concern is that some of the best basketball we have in college basketball every year is at the end of the regular season and during conference championship week, when some of those teams on the bubble need to play at a certain level to move the needle and really amplify their resumes. Are you concerned that if we do expand the NCAA tournament, some of that great theater that we see in late February and early March might go away?
Personally, John, I understand that perspective. I personally don't have that same concern. Having been around the game for 35 years now, at one level or another, I've yet to know a team or a coach that wasn't at the end of the season in particular trying to get better, trying to advance their opportunities, because you can't just turn it on and off, right? This idea that, fans and some media have that like you can coast and, get ready for March is not a real idea. I don't think with the teams that I've been around in over 3 decades. You're always trying to get better, right? You're always trying to improve your seeding. You're always trying to win a conference championship or indeed win a national championship. And so I don't know that, the stakes, the motivation that teams have at the end of the season is going to be any different regardless of the size of the NCAA tournament, because it's too competitive and there's too much at stake. But I could be wrong. I don't know. We've seen that in other sports, and I think the entirety of the season is important to me. I mean, you mentioned the end. We talk a lot about the way the season starts, the games in November and December, having interest in college basketball throughout the entire season, especially when it's competing for time with college football and the NFL, is also an important factor in all this.
So much to get to with this topic. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet, and I'm going to again bring up a topic that I think is very important because I'm an equal opportunity person when it comes to reporting on college basketball. Mid-majors are part of the fabric of March Madness, and mid-majors and having somebody obviously shine as Cinderella is part of what makes this tournament so great. We've seen obviously different reported models out there where we could see the 12 lowest seeded automatic qualifiers now playing Tuesday and Wednesday with the chance to advance to Thursday and Friday. I'm somebody for years who has always kind of felt and was very opinionated about that if you win your respective conference tournament, you should have the right to play on Thursday and Friday. Now, in the model right now, obviously, some of those teams play in Dayton. But obviously, if the lowest seeded 12 automatic qualifiers were to play on Tuesday and Wednesday, we would have less mid-majors and even low majors in some cases getting the opportunity to go to Thursday and Friday. If we do expand, do we minimize the possibility of having Cinderella play a major role in March Madness?
Well, first of all, don't believe everything that you read or hear. There's no determination on any kind of format expansion come. And that's something that the committees take into consideration in all of this. What would make the most sense and what would work the best. The committees understand more than anyone that David versus Goliath and the Cinderella stories are what makes March Madness so special and so beloved. So there's going to be serious consideration given to any decisions around format in that regard. But it's a national championship at the end of the day. We're trying to determine a national champion as well, and how we structure that in a way that makes sense for the size of the field and the quality of the depth of the field is going to be a determining factor as well.
One of the things I think isn't getting enough attention is probably one of the main things you have to deal with when you're thinking about trying to pull off this 3-week tournament in a tight 3-week window. And that's the logistics of getting all these teams around the country. How much is that obviously a main part of the discussion with expansion? Because adding more teams means obviously adding more difficult travel logistics.
Yeah, very much a significant factor and component in all of this consideration. The committees don't take any of this lightly. First of all, they have a responsibility not just about a national championship, but to provide a great experience for all the teams, the student athletes, and coaches that participate. And so every portion of that is important, right? And so that is a factor, just like it is today with the current field size of 68.
Yep.
And it's one of the things that the staff and committees are still working on, because that can't be diminished in any way. That experience can't be diminished, and I think that's core to the committee's decision making.
Is one thing that's been discussed in these discussions that regardless whether or not the NCAA tournament expands or not, there will still be all automatic qualifiers, on the table for every league in the sport?
Yeah, that's guaranteed by our Constitution, and even with the governance restructuring that just happened, that is guaranteed. So is the distribution of the Basketball Performance Fund and Equal Conference Fund units that come participating in success in the basketball championships, both of them. So that won't change for sure. But protecting those automatic qualifiers for the foreseeable future, well beyond next year and even the next decade, is something that is a part of this consideration. Like, how do you continue to keep what's special and really important in March Madness, in the tournaments there, and protect it long term, is also kind of a factor in this consideration as well.
Well, I think that's one of the things that people love to talk about, because one would think from the periphery that 4 or 8 extra spots would open the door for more opportunities, maybe for non-power conferences. But you and I both know that's not always how it works. If we did expand by, let's say, 4 or 8, what would you think could the percentage be of power conference versus non-power conference?
Well, we've looked at the history of that a little bit, kind of making some projections. And it would be opportunity for the best teams, regardless of the conference. Given the depth and the size of the power leagues right now, it may trend more towards some of those leagues, but not exclusively. Every year there are programs from mid-major conferences that have outstanding years that, when there's bid stealers, don't get into the field. Yep. That would, a few more opportunities would open the door for some of those teams as well.
I know that if there was expansion, the NCAA would have to find another site in addition to Dayton to play these games on the Tuesday or Wednesday of the first week, Tuesday and Wednesday of the first week. Has it been decided what city and or venue could be in play to host those games?
No, it hasn't been determined. Dayton's an incredible first four host. They've been, just such a huge part of March Madness going back, well over a decade now. And we honor them and appreciate everything they do to start the tournament with such an exciting, atmosphere and environment. And, if there was expansion, we would have to consider how we replicate that in some way. And that will be a challenge, because Dayton has been so successful doing that, so committed to doing that. But no determination on anything beyond just, ideas at this point.
Dan, in addition to college basketball, which obviously contains my life pretty much every minute of every day, from opening day, November 3rd, until the end of the Final Four, I'm a big movie guy. And I remember there was a quote from Tom Hanks in the movie A League of Their Own. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everybody would do it. The hard is what makes it great. I am very, very concerned that we are going to take away what it means to make the NCAA tournament if we open it up to more spots. And I'm curious, from your perspective, as somebody who's had a life in basketball, are we minimizing the accomplishment if we expand the bracket by 8 teams?
I'm open-minded, because there is no decision that's been made, and I'm not making the decision anyways. The committees are.
Yep.
But again, as I go back and look, at our recent experience, the Big 12, you could say it at the SEC or the Big 10 or the Big East or the ACC, the schools that are putting investment into college basketball. It's not just those leagues; it's many, many, many others as well. And the quality of those teams and the depth of college basketball means that there are a whole lot more teams that are better, that are more invested, more committed. And, I think some consideration of modest expansion to provide opportunities and access to any number of teams or programs at any level of the game is something that should get serious consideration, and it is being given serious consideration. I don't know that I agree with, it's less hard, right? That somehow, if there's a few more teams that would be part of March Madness, it's still hard. It's hard to get in. It's going to be hard to be seated in a place that gives your team the best opportunity to advance. It certainly would be hard to win in advance. It always is. And whether the field is 68 or 76, it would be hard to win one or more games in the NCAA tournament. Again, reasonable arguments can be made on either side of this issue, and are being made. And ultimately we'll see where the committees net out. I don't know that I agree, just hypothetically, with this is not a topic or an area that we shouldn't be giving consideration to, because the game has evolved. The game's changed a lot. There's a lot going on, as we started talking about, with NIL and with transfer portal. And, in order to keep the tournament relevant, contemporary, and future thinking, so that it's still healthy and growing and so beloved for years and decades to come, it feels like this is an area that we should be giving serious thought and consideration to, regardless of what the outcome may be.
What's the timeline for a decision on 2027 and beyond?
Nothing imminent, nothing that's even scheduled at this point.
Dan, you obviously oversee all basketball. So for you, it's not just the NCAA tournament, it's everything. What would happen to the postseason NIT if the NCAA tournament expanded by 4 or 8 spots?
Premature. I don't know, John. We would certainly talk with our partners. ESPN is an incredible partner for the NIT championship and the WBIT championship for women. And, it'd be premature to even think or speculate about that. We're excited about the NIT. It's going to finish this year in Indianapolis on Final Four weekend for the first time ever, with the semifinals at Hinkle Fieldhouse at Butler and the championship game on Sunday, Final Four weekend at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, just after the Division II and Division III national championship games. So NIT's got great history. It's going to be a 32-team field again, and we're excited to see who earns their way in and who advances to win a championship.
Dan, how much does this topic, just tournament expansion, just weigh on your mind, just, day after day, night after night?
Well, it's part of my job, John, and a lot of things weigh on my mind around the game, but it's certainly not a burden because I get lucky to work in the game and around the tournaments, and certainly there's a responsibility that comes with it and supporting the committees and their discussion and consideration, but I wouldn't consider it a burden.
Well, let's talk about obviously something that we all have to look forward to right now that we know is obviously going to be intact and in form, and that's this year's Final Four, this season's Final Four in 2026 in Indianapolis, your home city, but also the city 5 years ago that hosted the bubble. What emotions do you have, as you get set to begin a season where it's going to end with a real Final Four, knock on wood, in a non-pandemic setting?
Well, it will be a little emotional, probably. I'm sure you'll share some of those emotions, having been inside the bubble with us for those 3 weeks, and seeing each other in the hallways of the convention center. And it's hard to believe it was 5 years ago. Something I think we take an enormous amount of pride in, that we were able to pull that off for the teams that were able to participate and have those lifelong memories. Of course, Baylor and Gonzaga making the championship game, and the Bears being a national champion. So it'll bring back a lot of emotions and a lot of pride, I think, not just staff, but committee and the entire Indianapolis community. It's also, though, it'll be 11 years in April since the last normal Final Four in Indianapolis, 2015 being the last one. So it's exciting to be able to put on a normal Final Four with all of the events around it. And then to add this year, as I mentioned, the Division II and III national championship games, the NIT championship game as part of those festivities, it's going to be awesome. And, while I work in Indianapolis, I live here now. I'm not from Indiana. I'm not a Hoosier. But I do think it is one of, if not the best place for the Final Four. And I think people are just going to be excited to be back and celebrate college basketball in a great basketball state. And people around here are really excited about it.
No, as it should be. Indianapolis is always terrific for the Final Four. Dan, you've seen thousands of games in all your years doing this, being around college basketball. I'm not going to make you pick one, but I'm curious if there were 3 to 5 memorable games that you were at in all your years doing this, what would be at the top of the list?
Wow, John. That's a tough one on a spot like this, but I was fortunate to sit courtside during the 6 overtime Syracuse-UConn Big East tournament game. That has to be, right at the top, just the historic nature of that. Some of the championship games that we've seen since I've been at the NCAA stand out for sure. Villanova, Connecticut, Carolina game, good Jenkins shot for sure. I don't know. They start to run together after a while when you've been in it long enough. But I've been fortunate to have a really good courtside seat to many spectacular college basketball games.
And more to come in 25-26. Let's wrap on this. Let's say one day they make your life into a movie. From growing up as Dave Gavitt's son to being at the epicenter of everything at the old Big East with 11 bids in 2011, to then going to the NCAA and orchestrating everything with the bubble and beyond. Who plays Dan Gavitt?
Tom Hanks.
I love it. I love it. Off the League of Their Own reference. Dan.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be a very popular movie, John, but you're very kind, and it's always great to be with you. And couldn't be more excited about this season. And thanks to the way you cover the game all year round. It's incredible. I don't know how you do it. I know you don't sleep a lot, especially from November through April. But we all appreciate your passion for the game and how well you report on it. I'm looking forward to the ride with you.
Dan, same here. Thanks for a couple of minutes. And as always, look forward to staying connected with you along the way.
Thanks, John.
That's NCAA Senior Vice President of Basketball, Dan Gavitt. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this is Inside College Basketball Now.